Hello everyone, I'm Inverse and welcome to game 3 of the replay review marathon. Today's game is going to be a Wehrmacht against British match, vanilla against opposing fronts on 3xtr3m. The hero of today's game, Bob99, extreme on the game replays board. And we're going to be watching the game from his perspective with the fog of war on, as this is a replay review. Without further ado, let's get this game started. As I just want to mention a few things right off the bat. Thank you everybody for the feedback regarding the second match. I'm going to probably try to pause a little bit less frequently than I did last game. I understand last game was a long game and the pauses kind of dragged it out a little bit. 45 minutes for a video review, a replay review of any kind, is a pretty long time. So thank you for the feedback. I will definitely be taking it into account in this game. Anyways, getting on with the match. 3xtr3m against Brits. Taking a look at the opening build. Actually doing a 3-pio start. Something that I personally really do like when I am going tier 1 openings. I am partial to 5-pio tier 2 just because it's the most solid way to win against Brits right now. It's very, very difficult to counter short of Staghound spamming in the current 1v1 climate. However, we don't see any sort of... Oh, we have a 4-pio start actually. Missed one of those pios, and we don't have any sort of tier 1 coming up, so it might be a straight tech to tier 2. If that is the case, I would really like to see a 5th pio, 5, 6 pios now, so a little bit of a modification. We'll see how Extreme manages to pull this one off. Looks like he's focusing on the right hand side. Just going to speak a little bit in general about this map against the British. Important to note, British players really want to be planting their HQ truck on either this munitions point right here, this +10, or this +10 right here. We see the Brit player already capping this +10 up here with his first recon squad, no doubt. So looking like he's going to be moving his truck right about here. Pretty standard placement. 3xtr3m, a pretty good map for Wehrmacht against Brits, at least in my opinion. There can be some difficult moments. A lot of red cover makes it very difficult against Bren carriers at times. However, a fast tier 2 start pretty much nullifies any sort of Bren carrier pressure, at least super early, unless he tries something extreme like a Bren base rush to keep your tier 2 from going up. Meanwhile, back in Extreme's base, we see the tier 2 tech coming up, so we are going to be seeing a fast tier 2 after that high pio opening. He got 6 pios. I personally prefer 5 pios. The reason for this is instead of getting that 6th pio, you can get a med bunker super early. I personally would get a med bunker with the last pio I build. I would cap a few points, cap a point or two, and then build that med bunker right away, even if you don't have the munitions to upgrade that bunker into a med bunker right off the bat. You're not spending your munitions on anything else that early in the game. Meanwhile, we have a pio in a house. This is kind of a waste at this moment. There was a squad harassing over here, however it has moved away, so the squad going to want to start capping something or other. We see a early mortar emplacement right down here. This is good news for the Wehrmacht player. Reason for this is he is not going for a tier 1 start, so the mortar half track not going to be too good. Mortar half tracks really most effective when they are dislodging MGs and they're doing damage to Volks. A fast tier 2 gives the Wehrmacht player a far more mobile army and an army which is far better equipped to dealing with the static defenses of a Brit player, should that Brit player decide to go with those static defenses. Meanwhile, back in the base, we have looking like 2 pios, going to be quick building this Krieg barracks. Definitely a good idea. Looking down at the resources right now, I would like to see Extreme getting a Compcraft Center right after this. Reason being, he can build a Gren out of this, and then even build another Gren, another pack, or a half track rather, and still be able to afford that Compcraft Center while maintaining constant production out of this Krieg barracks. That's the main thing to worry about. You never want to be queuing up too many units, because that's just resources in the bank not doing anything. It's an investment that hasn't paid off. Instead of, say, queuing up 2 or 3 squads in this building, he could be, I mean, he's not doing that, so I'm talking in purely hypotheticals right now. He could be getting the Krieg Barracks, or the Krieg Barracks. Already has the Krieg Barracks. He could be getting the Comcraft Center. Also needs to be getting a med bunker as early as possible. If he had already built that med bunker, as I had suggested, he would already have the upgrade. Furthermore, really cut off on the left-hand side. Kind of an issue with this many piles. You always want to try to be capping stuff, even if it seems like it's really close to your opponent's base. Like his opponent looking like he's set up over here for some strange reason, although hopefully he is right here. I actually didn't notice. But even if you cap like right near your opponent's base, that's perfectly fine because he needs units there to push you off, and with 6 squads he's really not going to have that many units available at his disposal compared to yours, so you can be in more places than he can. Just a really good situation. We see 600 manpower banked right now for the Wehrmacht player. Never a good situation to be in. When you go in 5 Pio tier 2, 6 Pio tier 2, any kind of fast tier 2 tech, you need to be constantly pumping Grens. You're going to want to get a pack just to be safe against Stewards and to make dealing with this Bren carrier a little bit easier. A half track, always a good idea. When I go 5 Pio tier 2, I always go Gren, half track, and then either a Gren or a pack depending on the situation. It's usually a second Gren and then a pack. Meanwhile, on the right hand side, another emplacement and another Pio squad going down. All this emplacements should be a bit of a tip off in that the Wehrmacht player will be going for more of a passive game. The Brit player rather. That is perfectly fine. Idle squads in the base, however, going to want to get these movement. It's perfectly fine to let the Brit player go into a passive game when you do this kind of strategy. The only thing you cannot do is be complacent and allow him to completely board up his side of the map. That's just going to make things a lot more difficult. We finally see the second Gren coming out. However, this Krieg Barracks been idle for probably, I don't know, I want to say 2 or 3 minutes almost, which is not 3 minutes, probably a minute and a half to 2 minutes. Definitely not something you want to see. Always want to have as close to constant production out of those production facilities as possible. Getting Vet 1 already, however, he just got his second Grenadier. Now, given all of the resource floating that's been going on, that's a perfectly fine option. I mean, you wouldn't have been able to spend your money quickly enough and like maintain constant production anyways, so that perfectly fine, to be completely honest. However, I would have liked to see a bit more quicker Krieg Barracks tier 2 units before any sort of veterancy tech has been had. We see Pioneers trying to engage this Tommy right here. Probably not a good idea. However, there is a Grand squad coming in to support. Once again, almost 700 manpower in the bank. Really a main focus. There's not too much I can really comment on regarding this game, and it is a quicker game. This will not be a 45-minute long slugfest like we saw last game, but there isn't really too much I can comment on with this kind of manpower floating going on. The very first kind of milestone for a Company of Heroes player should be reducing the number of idle squads. We see an idle squad over here with a Shrek, could be harassing, could be doing something that's just kind of wasted money over here. Just like over here we have a bunch of idle squads right there. We have a mortar coming out, which I really don't like against Brits. The mortar half track, far more versatile, far more durable than the Wehrmacht mortar. Just all in all a better unit than the Wehrmacht mortar and far easier to counter. Meanwhile, we have finally not too much resource floating, down to 100 manpower. However, looking at the units tab, we only have 2 Grands. They have Vet 1, but then we have a mortar. Looking at this right now, we do have Shreks, but a Stuart would absolutely wreak havoc on this unit composition. A single canister shot would all but likely kill an entire... Oh, that was a nice mortar shot. And we have Vet 2. Okay, first I'm going to talk about the lack of AT, then I'll get on with the veterancy choice. Idle squad over here as well. But that lack of AT, a Stuart is very powerful if used correctly against this kind of composition. A single canister shot can take out a whole Gren squad if the Gren squad clumps up and he times the canister shot well. And that's a pretty dangerous situation to be in when your entire anti-tank consists solely of those infantry-based anti-tank weapons, in this case the Panzer Shreks. And that can be very dangerous. Meanwhile, we have a Wehrmacht player coming in to support. Once again, almost 700 manpower in the bank. Really a main focus. There's not too much I can comment on with this kind of manpower floating going on. The very first kind of milestone for a Company of Heroes player should be reducing the number of idle squads. We only have 2 Grands. They have Vet 1, but then we have a mortar. Looking at this right now, we do have 2 Grands. They have Vet 1, but then we have a mortar. and without any sort of AT, and with this kind of manpower floating, there's really no reason not to have a pack on the field at this point. However, he might actually get this Bren. One little thing to note about this retreating lieutenant, we saw it over there for a second, and he did get the Bren, so good play to a certain extent, but also just kind of poor play by his opponent. Not really something you want to be relying on when you're trying to improve your game. Meanwhile, I'm just going to pause the game for a second and just speak a little bit to the veterancy and just to what he wants to be doing in this game against Brits using this strategy. First of all, this retreating lieutenant we saw over here with very, very low health. Always want to focus down lieutenants in battles. They're the most valuable units. They're fairly easy to kill, and they give your opponent extremely, extremely powerful combat bonuses. I'm not really sure exactly what they are, but they're definitely viable combat bonuses meant to compete with Wehrmacht veterancy. And if you manage to kill them, that's doing yourself a pretty big service. Furthermore, all of these emplacements are a pretty big tell rather that let's try that again. That is a pretty big tell that the Brit player is not really going to have much in the way of mobile forces. We have seen a few Tommies. I estimate he probably has 3 Tommies at this point. I'm not really sure. I don't want to check the Fog of War to check, but I'm guessing around 3 Tommies. And however, he hasn't really been pressured at all, and a big reason for this is this manpower floating, and another reason is the super fast Vet 2. You only have 2 infantry squads like taking advantage of this Vet 2. I would not get Vet 2. I would get Vet 1 after probably 3 Grens, and Vet 2 after 4 or 5. 4 at the absolute earliest, unless I've really, really screwed up and I really need something like that. But in the majority of cases, non-special cases, I would get it after 4 or 5 Grens. Going to keep this game going a little bit now. Finally capping up here. Still does not have a med bunker, however. Kind of an essential component of the strategy. Any infantry heavy strategy, infantry heavy opener in any matchup for Wehrmacht, you really, really want that med bunker. 17 pounder doing a good job picking off right here. This is one of the instances I was talking about. Gonna want to focus down, just right click on this lieutenant. He really should have right clicked on that lieutenant, tried to kill it before retreating with his Gren squad. It is, even if you lose a man or 2 on that Gren squad, almost lose that squad, it's completely worth it. This mortar, a little bit of lack of attention on Extreme's part. Gonna lose that mortar squad, quite unfortunate. Not really too much he could do about it aside from not put it there, of course, which is definitely something that can be improved upon, can be altered. Meanwhile, important to note the extreme strength of Panzerschrecks against British emplacements. Of course, only 2 Grens on the field and 800 manpower being floated right now. Definitely want to keep that constant Krieg Barracks Grenadier production going. Furthermore, just something to note that that Shreks do ridiculous amounts of damage to British emplacements. This emplacement was covering this little area, if you'd remember from before, probably angled so that it would hit right here. Extreme could definitely squeeze a Grand Squad, such as this Grand Squad, right around this little area, squeeze it in, and then get a little bit of damage off on this squad, on this emplacement, probably kill it and free up this right hand side to be taken back. Instead, he is kind of sitting idle in his base, lots of idle squads, lots of manpower being floated, not really too much else to say, just because of all that manpower. Lots of wire going down, which is a good idea. However, at this point in the game, I really do think Extreme's attention could be paid to far more important areas of his place, such as building stuff and getting stuff out of his base once it's been retreated. Here we go, a Steward on the field with no AT at all. Finally, a 3rd Grand Squad, however, sapper mines, bam. A 3rd Grand Squad, yes, but a canister shot's going to absolutely destroy these. Yep, right there. Actually, that didn't do too much. That was a lucky canister shot for the Wehrmacht player. Kind of a waste, only killed a Pio and a Grand, so kind of good fortune there. But just looking at the manpower, just solely the manpower, I'm really going to focus on this because without solid, it's called mechanics in other RTSs, and in StarCraft it holds a bit more gravity because the mechanics of StarCraft are far and away more advanced than the mechanics of Company of Heroes. It's far easier to keep your money low and to keep constant production in Company of Heroes, just given the way the game is designed and the way the game is played. But it's just pure mathematics. If you don't spend your money and your opponent does, your opponent's going to have more stuff than you. If your opponent has more stuff than you, he's going to have more map than you. He's going to have an easier time playing the game than you are, because he has just a bigger advantage. And just idle things like this, I'm not really sure if that's a voluntary lapse in concentration, say building this observation post over on the right hand side, or if that's involuntary. I mean, I'm not perfectly sure, but just in general, don't really want to be having any squads idle. Even if you have to send squads out one at a time and just position them out of combat, you want them on the field and not in your base. Furthermore, seeing Vet 1 on Pioneers, kind of an interesting decision, but you know, without spending money, kind of difficult to comment any further on something like that. Mortar still here. The Brit player obviously did not care too much for that. We still don't have a Doctrine out on the field. I would really like to see Terror. Terror is my preferred Doctrine when playing the strategy. Reason being, the 1 CP Zeal is an extremely effective ability, especially for Grens. And when you have a lot of infantry on the field, it's very, very, very nice to be able to take advantage of that Zeal and just make your Grens a bit more powerful pretty much right off the bat. You get 1 CP pretty darn early, especially against Brits. But we see trying to counter the Stuart with Shreks, not really a great idea. There we go, finally killing that Lieutenant. Probably should have focused it a little bit earlier, however, that's okay. Lieutenant does go down. The Stuart probably not going to die. You can just drive out of there. Something died right there. A Grand Squad hit a mine, once again up to 700 manpower. Just kind of one of those small things that you really have to get used to. Always not focusing fully on the battle, but looking at the battle and knowing when you're safe to look back, or even just tapping on the F1 through F6 hotkeys and using hotkeys and quicker keyboard movements rather than moving and mousing back to the base in order to rebuild and reinforce. Actually, a fun fact, when I started playing Company of Heroes, I was a Brit player at first for about a month, and then I bought vanilla and I played exclusively Americans for about, I'd like to say 6 or 8 months. I played nothing but Americans, and I got to the point that I would hotkey, or I would control group my first 2 engineers to 1 and 2, and then I would control group each of my 4 starting riflemen to 3, 4, 5, and 6. And the reason for this was, by doing that, I could easily tap through them all. I could tap 3, 4, 5, 6 on my keyboard. I could see which ones needed to be reinforced. I could quickly retreat them in a flank, because I wasn't really too good at quickly checking a battle and knowing if I was going to win or lose it, and then being able to go back to my base and reinforcing. So in order to kind of remediate that and kind of help myself out and let myself cheat a little bit, I did something that I wouldn't do today. Today I never hotkey any of my rifle squads, but when I was starting out, it was definitely helpful to be able to be looking at my base and reinforcing, and then just tapping a hotkey and then seeing, oh man, that rifle squad is suppressed, or that rifle squad's really low, I should retreat that squad. And even when I was in battle, checking my battle, microing around my battle, and tapping through my hotkeys and noticing, hey, I can reinforce this guy, I might as well do that. And with a few keyboard clicks, I was easily able to reinforce it without even looking back to my base sector. You don't even have to be able to look here. You don't need to ever look back here if you don't want to. Of course, there's definitely some benefits to looking back there. There's definitely some drawbacks to looking back to your base. Sometimes you have to, but if you don't want to, there are definitely ways for you to set it up so that you don't have to. Furthermore, a little thing, there's a mine right here. I'm not sure if Extreme noticed that, but you could see the sappers planting that mine in the fog of war, and there it is. There it goes. Looks like he did know it was there. He didn't run over it right away, waited for the mortar to blow it up. So good little bit of, ouch, that hurt. Good little bit of foresight right there. Lots of mines everywhere. Oh my goodness. Gren's getting blown up. That's why you don't blob around at all. You never want, like, always want to be spreading your squads out as much as possible, using tab on a group of units. If you select this group of units, you can hit tab like I'm doing right now, and you tab through them all. Very, very easy to split up your squads like that. So select a group of units, tab, right click, tab, right click, tab, right click, tab, right click, stuff like that. It's small. Hey, that hit something. Or maybe it blew up, I don't know. That was interesting though. Just kind of small micro tips like that save you time and save you attention so that you can focus on other things like keeping this manpower down below 1,000, because that is never a good place for it to be unless you absolutely do not need anything. Like say you've got like 6 or 7 grands and you've got 2 packs and you've got every single Fed upgrade and you're just chilling and you have like the entire map, then sure, you can float 500 or 600 manpower. But at this point in the game, you're behind, you have very little of the map, you don't really have too much to focus on, to be completely honest. I mean, you have a few squads in here, you have a pack that is moving while cloaked. Just kind of going to mention that, going to pause for a second and just say, if you notice, this pack was moving pretty darn slow. Reason for that was even when the pack is detected or discovered by enemy squads, say these squads and this tank right here, if you don't manually take the cloaking off, it'll move at cloak speed even though the opponent can shoot at it and do damage to it. Always a good idea. Just quickly hit the squad, hit whatever hotkey you have for cloak decloak. By default I think it's C. I use grid keys, so I've got it set to D, and just decloak it. It does wonders. It's something like twice as fast, something like that, something ridiculous, and it's really helpful. So yeah, this squad's been idle over here for a good long while, and this mortar is actually doing more damage than I thought it would. But this Cromwell's not going to die to 2 Shreks unless he very poorly micros it, which he actually might, which will be hilarious. But I was gonna say something. Oh yeah, tactical map. Use the tactical map a lot. The one of the main reasons for me switching to grid keys was because the tactical map was rebound to Control and S. It's a lot easier to hit Control and S while you're microing, considering your hand is already on this left hand side of the keyboard, than it is to go all the way over to the right hand side and hit 0 on the numpad. Conversely, you can just install something like auto hotkey, some kind of scripting program like that, and just set Control and S to numpad 0, so that whenever you hit Control and S, the computer interprets it as numpad 0. Definitely another potential option in order to assist with microing in that way. But yeah, there's 1,000 manpower in the bank, and idle squads in the base, and idle squads on the right hand side, and no doctrine picked still. You never really want to wait this long to pick a doctrine. There's definitely some merit in waiting a little bit to pick a doctrine. You don't want to pick a doctrine that your opponent hard counters, and if you need, say, stormtroopers and you've already picked terror or defensive, you're in a little bit of trouble. However, at this point in the game, there's really no excuse for not having some kind of doctrine decision, especially considering the fact that if you wait too long, I think it's past 2 CPs, so if you have 3 or more CPs, you actually gain CPs at a slower rate than you would normally if you keep your CPs below, I think it's 3, I'm not positive. It's something like 65 experience, 65 command experience for the first 2 CPs, and then it jumps up to 85 for CPs 3, 4, 5, so on and so forth. Just something else to keep in mind. But yeah, I'm gonna fast forward a little bit through the rest of this game since I've completely run out of things to say, and with 1,000 manpower in the bank, there's really not too much I can comment about with the actual proceedings of the game, except to say try to move packs decloaked as much as possible. They move quicker. You just gotta tap them in order to hit the hotkey to recloak. I personally set all my AT guns to 2 for both matchups, or both factions rather, Americans and the Wehrmacht, and reason for this is it just gives me more control. I can tap 2 and I always know 2 is my AT guns every single game, never changes, and it's just a really comfortable and really quick way to get AT where I need it to go safely and effectively. And with that, I'm going to fast forward, watch stuff die, watch stuff try to cap stuff that's shooting at it, watch the big Brit blob of death run and kill our heroic mortar team. They never stood a chance. And good old Bob99, good old Extreme, typing out the GG and dropping out of this game. There we go. All right, game 3 out the door. Thank you guys for watching. I'll be back tomorrow with game number 4. Once again, any comments, any sort of feedback, definitely appreciated. Do keep in mind these are educational casts. They're lower level games. They're my mentors on game replays. If you're interested in mentoring or being a mentee, check out gamereplays.org/company of heroes and have some fun, guys. Thank you for watching.